Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to have this opportunity to dive into maybe what I'm starting to think about as the next iteration or the next dimension of my own personal work. And I was thinking to myself before this began, I thought, oh, I feel like we're all going to have a really good time doing this. And then I went, oh, was that an intuitive feeling? Or was that me making it up? What is the truth of it? So, in fact, when we work together today, play together today, investigate together today, I want it to feel as if we are all exploring together because I have not, as of this moment, yet found any double blind scientific studies that in some way would corroborate or validate what I'm going to share with you today. But that being said, I feel that one of the reasons that we're all here, as I see everyone that's coming in, many of you are people who have explored this idea of a somatic relationship to my emotions, to my choices, to my possibilities. And so I wanted to just start out with the notion, the idea that intuition for me anyway is not some message from beyond or connecting with something higher. Not that I don't believe that those things are possible, but what I've come to realize is that an intuitive choice is actually a somatic choice. It is having such a clear and deep understanding of what's taking place inside of me that the choice reveals itself. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit with some ideas from research. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the scientist Antonio Damasio, but that's okay because I'm going to tell you. Some of you are saying yes, and some of you are like, okay, that there's nothing I know about. He's a neuroscientist, and for those of you who are really interested in sort of why we make choices and how we make choices and how that relates to our brain and our body, his books are really interesting, a bit dense, but very interesting. And he was one of the first people who actually sort of proved that when we make a choice, when I say, oh, I want the chocolate ice cream and not the vanilla ice cream, that your body has already made that choice before your mind and your thought has made the choice. He measured people, in different kinds of situations, card games, things like that. And he saw that the body changed as before the person actually made the concrete choice. So he was already talking about the fact that there's a somatic component to the way we make our decisions, to the way we dive into the things that we want to do. And alongside his work, there's another scientist whose name is Robert Sapolsky. And you can, you're all going to have the replay, so you don't have to take notes. But Robert Sapolsky is a behavioral scientist who spent many, many years studying orangutans and working in statistics and all that. And he actually wrote a book called Determined, where he's positing that we don't have any free will. But his definition of us not having any free will goes right back to what Damasio said, in the sense that everything that I'm doing is based on my education, my genetics, my environment, and then the body does its thing, which I just thought was just so incredible and kind of a validation of my own experience. So then I started to look at this relationship of how my, whether it's the sweat, right? Because they measured the sweat, they measured the electrical impulses. Where does all of that come from? And ultimately, of course, it's got something to do with the nervous system and how the brain functions. So this is where I kind of had my mind blown recently when I discovered the work of another scientist. His name is Mark Solms, and Solms. And his book, I don't want to say don't read it because the first part is really good. But then he gets into a whole lot of other stuff about alternate realities and computer simulations and all that. But he's a neuropsychiatrist. So he used his background as a neuroscientist and then trained in psychoanalysis and psychiatry. And he was the one who did all of these experiments having to do with how the brain makes decisions. And what they've narrowed it down to is this place in my brain, sort of right in the back in the middle. And I'm going to ask Sarah to bring up the first slide so that we can actually take a look at what's happening in that spot. It's a section of the brain that Mark Solms calls the brain's decision-making center. And it's so interesting. It looks like a little hat, doesn't it? When the first time I saw this picture, I was like, whoa, it looks like a hat right on my head. And if you see on this slide, there's a section that's called the periaqueductal gray. So, and don't you love that it's aqueducts? There's the cerebral aqueduct, there's the periaqueductal, which basically means, 3 or 4 aqueducts. And these aqueducts are where all of these different neural impulses are coming in, almost like they're pouring into a canal. And then that pours out how your body reacts. Right there in the middle, in that gray thing, is deciding whether you're going to, move your head to the right or not, whether you're going to jump from stone to stone, crossing a stream or not, whether you're going to finish your dinner or not. All of that is happening right in that place. It's a chemical, neurological moment that's constantly happening. Now, and you can get rid of that slide, Sarah. I just wanted everybody to see it because what's so fascinating about it is that it's also doing things faster than my cognitive brain. In other words, when I think I've made a decision, when I go, I think I want to do this, that part of me has already made that decision. So where does that information come from? That was the exciting part. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from our experience of ourselves, our sensations, our instincts, and those things lead to our intuition, right? Our ability to be able to sense ourselves in space, our ability to sense the inside of ourselves. So the things that in somatic work we call exteroception, proprioception, interoception. All of those aspects are contributing to what I consider to be an intuitive decision that I've made. So, like I said, I don't really want this to be like a lecture of knowledge. It's more like an opening of the box of all these possibilities that we're having. So I want to look at some of these ideas and give us a practical experience of each of these things so that we can see where Lavinia's going with this webinar, as well as the course that I'm offering. So the first thing that I wanted to look at is something that I know everyone here is familiar with, and that is sensation. And just the simple definition of sensation from the dictionary. Sarah, can I have the next slide? By the way, if anyone has any technical issues at any time, just chat Sarah. She's in the background driving everything for me. So a sensation is a physical feeling or perception resulting from something that happens to or comes in contact with the body. So when you think about that, every moment is an invitation to sensation, because even if I'm quote unquote not touching anything, there's still the air. The air is coming in, the air pressure is against me. So I'm constantly having the opportunity to have a sensation. So I do want to start right away. And Sarah, you can let that go. Thank you. I want to start right away with a little bit of an exploration of how we can deepen our own sense of our exteroceptive sense and our sense of sensation. You know, your skin is your largest sense organ, and it covers your entire body. So it's receiving information all the time, and it's pouring right into that periaqueductal bray so that you decide how you're going to take your next step. So what I'd like to invite everybody to do, you can do this in sitting or you can stand up. I'm going to stand up simply because I like standing up. Sitting, you know, they say sitting is the new smoking, so I like to stand up. But if you, whether you're sitting or standing, could you just take a moment, closing your eyes, and begin to sense the contact of your feet with the floor without changing anything, without altering or expecting anything, just giving yourself the sense of the contact with the floor. So each time I take a step, I am altering that information, whether I step forward or I step back. If you're sitting, you can be thinking about your sits bones, or you can be thinking about your feet. And then allowing your attention to travel upward as if you were sensing the bones of yourself, your skeleton kind of on your feet, up your spine, into the top of your head, feeling how everything stacks up. And then you can begin to expand from the sensation of your solidity and your bones outward to see, can you sense any part of your skin, how the air is maybe touching your hands or your face, where your arms are in space. And then you're going to expand your awareness a little bit further. And can you, without looking, and it's cool with your eyes closed, have a sensation of the distance of a wall or an object to your right? Just feeling how spacious is that area to my right? And how is that sensation different than the sensation of your feet in contact with the floor, with something solid? How does my arm and my side have a clear sense of that area? This is what we call exteroception. And then your left side. And then the front of yourself. And then the space behind yourself. And then staying with that sensation, could you just begin an easy turning to your right to look around, maybe to verify for yourself, oh, right, the wall is much closer or much further than I imagined. And as you're turning, how do your eyes take in the information? And then try the same thing to your left. And as you're turning to your left, can you just ask yourself the question, how do I know that this is my left? What's different about turning to my left than to my right? How do I take it in? I couldn't resist. I had to go back and look to the right just to compare. So it's just kind of interesting. All of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute, what is it like on the other side, right? And then pause a moment, and just with your eyes closed, could you just begin moving your eyes a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left? And as you're doing it with your eyes closed, can you let your mind picture what's in front of you, what's to the side of you, almost as if you could see your room even though your eyes are closed. You have a mental picture of what you could see. And then leave that, open your eyes, and then just take another turn to your right, another turn to your left, and just sensing for yourself, what's the room like for you now? And what is the sensation in your arms, in your legs? And we'll just come back to sitting. It's just a place for us to begin. I was thinking back about certain times in my life, and maybe you can be thinking the same thing as I'm talking of having made a sudden decision or choice and just going, I'm doing this. I'm going for it. Maybe it was a life choice. Maybe it's something simple like I'm going to the theater tonight. I'm not going to the theater tonight. But for me, when I started to think back on those things, I recognized that each time there was an impulse or a sensation or a quality in my experience of myself. Sometimes it was palpable, like what we just did. Sometimes it was more internal, and we'll go more into internal experiences during the course. But that idea that I can learn to listen to my own inner signals so that what seems like a decision out of the blue to others is a clear sense of exactly what I need. So, how is sensation related or different from an instinctive reaction, and how is that related to intuition? So I wanted to talk about instinct because sometimes people confuse intuition and instinct, right? Instinct is reflexive. If suddenly I went, boom, there were several of you who just, that's an instinctive reaction. The startle reflex in the human being is one of our few really instinctive reactions, that feeling of responding in that situation. So the definition of instinct is an innate, typically fixed pattern of behavior in animals, and us as animals as well, in response to certain stimuli. So we know that, animals can be born and be standing up instinctively within moments, where humans are constantly having to learn. So when we experience an instinctive reaction, we're not relying on our decision-making parts. We're letting the entire nervous system respond. Another way to look at it, and we can get rid of the slide, Sarah, thank you. I just wanted everybody to see the definition. One of the new definitions of the brain is that it's a prediction machine, right? That it's taking in all the information and it's predicting what happens next. And when something happens that we had not intuited or anticipated, then we experience what in science and statistics they call a surprisal. Instead of a surprise, it's something happening where the brain goes, wait a minute, my prediction was in error, right? And so we have that reflex. That's different than making an intuitive decision. So when we look at intuition, and if you could bring up the next slide, Sarah, we'll talk about intuition a little bit and its actual definition. So what I found really interesting is that the dictionary said the ability to understand something instinctively without the need for conscious reasoning. So it goes back to the periaqueductal bray and how that brain's decision area makes the decisions for us. And it uses the word instinct, but there's a key word in here, and that is the word understand. To be able to understand something without having to consciously reason it is where we go into the realm of intuition. And that's it for the slides. No more slides today. So what I wanted to do right at this moment is to have a second, a moment. I'm hoping all of you brought something to write on. You don't even have to write this necessarily, but to just take a moment and reflect. Whatever one comes up in your mind, a moment in your life where you made an intuitive choice about something. It could be big, it could be small, but just reflecting back on it, taking a moment to reflect. What was it that made you make that decision? Was it only logic? Was it a sensation? What was involved in the moment of knowing that you had to do that thing? And it doesn't matter whether it turned out well or not right now. We'll go more deeply into, what do I trust in a minute. Because I know for myself that there have been times where I made a decision and I thought I was making an intuitive decision, or that my gut was telling me it was the right thing, and it turned out to be a total disaster. I don't know if that's ever happened to anybody else, but it's definitely happened to me. And then there have been other times where it seemed like just everything was a confluence. And so that's where I got really curious. It's like, well, why do I do that? What was it that I ignored in the signals around me that caused me to make a decision that didn't turn out right? Now, of course, sometimes a decision that doesn't turn out right from an obvious way later on turns out to be a great teacher. So I'm not saying that every decision we're going to make is great, but what was it that I was not listening to or listening to? And if I reflect back on it, a lot of times my quote unquote wrong decision was based on a kind of anxiety of trying to prove something to people. And when I got over that need to try to prove something and really go into the truth of myself, I was able to sort of not damage myself as often. So that's just my particular one. Now, Steve, you asked a question, seems to happen without choice, possibly. Are you willing to unmute and go a little deeper into your question?
If you scroll up a little bit, Lavinia, someone else asked a question right before that, asking, "Is
Oh,
awe
is
an
awe an
instinct?"
instinct? All right, I'll see. I'll address that. Yes, but go ahead, Steve.
I just was trying to encourage people to use the chat because it's a nice little uh, add-on.
Okay, but
Um,
but
but
what's your question now that I've put you on the spot?
well, I don't. I have a question. I was trying to talk to the question was, is all AWE an instinct?
Oh, you were answering as awe an instinct.
Yes, yes.
So there's a difference between an instinctive, reflexive action and an emotional reaction, right? So awe is an emotion. It's not an instinct, because if it was an instinct, then every single person would feel awe at the same stimulus. And we don't all feel that. When I see a sunset or a rainbow or an incredible cello concert, right? Some of us are filled with awe and others are like, meh, right? So it's not an instinct. But it is an emotional reaction. And I have many courses on the emotions, as some of you know. And awe is definitely a chemical reaction that's happening. Now, if I'm experiencing awe in a moment, and it is information that I'm gathering in order to lead me to a decision. For example, the awe of a sunset makes me say, I'm going to become a painter, right? Then the awe is the sensation and emotion that is contributing to my possibility. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. So yes, when we have emotional reactions, that's the chemistry at work responding, but it's not intuiting or being instinctive. Does that make sense? Good. So now we're going to go into a little bit for ourselves. So this leads me to how do I know how to make a choice? How do I know what to listen to? How do I begin to start to use the tools of my own body in order to be able to use my intuition, develop my intuition, get more and more sensitive to the signs and the signals to allow me to make the decisions that I want? So what I'd like to invite you all to do is to think for a moment about a potential decision that you need to make in your life right now. It might not be a big one. It could be a huge one, right? So just think for a moment about something that maybe you've been vacillating. Maybe it's something that you're anxious about. Maybe it's a leap that you're wanting to take and you don't know if you're ready. Maybe, I mean, there's thousands of different possible decisions. And I would like you to write that down. And then, you don't have to write a whole story about it. It can just be a sentence or whatever. But then I would like you to take a moment as you're looking at what you have written and begin to pay attention to your breathing. And just notice whether when you turned your attention to your breathing, whether your breathing changed from the way you were breathing as you wrote. And of course, sometimes it's hard to tell. And now that you've taken a few moments to just connect with your breath without feeling like you had to breathe in a particular way or anything like that, can you look down at your paper again and notice how you feel about it? And is there anything new just from doing that small thing? And so I'd like to open it up for a couple of minutes here. There's a few questions that have appeared, but I'd also, if there's anybody that had an impression just now or an insight, if you can either pop it in the chat or raise your hand, we can unmute you to speak. So someone said right away that you're not as anxious about the decision. So that's a beginning, right? To just look at something and go, wow, all I have to do is breathe, and it changes a little bit. Anyone else have an insight or an observation based on that? Or anything you want to say? Great. So some are popping in here. I have a deeper understanding about it. I'm more anxious. So let's talk about that in a minute. It hurts my heart. Breathing is, sorry, my chat is too small, is the same, but there's an ache in my heart and I feel more tense and anxious. So that is information for you as well. Because if, as I monitor my breathing and I look at my decision and I feel more tense and anxious, do I really want to do the thing that I wrote down? Am I ready? Is it the right thing? Or is it something that needs more processing, more waiting, more preparation even, which goes back to a question that Jody mentioned. She said, oh, wait, you said I have a deeper understanding about understanding. Before it was something else. Oh, it was somebody else said intuition feels like inner alignment. I lost the one that was, delete that, Sarah. So when I become aware of my breath, I can become more aware of my truth and of my emotional self. So if I look at something and I say, this is what I really want to do, but now I feel a tightness in my heart and tension and breath, and then it feels like maybe I'm entering into the world of should. And is that an intuitive decision for doing it? Or is that an intuitive decision for maybe waiting a little bit? So many times we force ourselves to do things that we're not ready to do. Is being intuitive not always about taking the leap, but maybe knowing that this is not the time? So as my brain is cooled by breath, my nervous system slows down and is grounded in my decision. I feel calm and collected. And sometimes that happens after I decide not to do something. So we have to trust our intuition in both directions. That actually takes me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that's, what do I trust? How do I know when what I'm feeling is an intuitive rightness to not do something versus just habitual fear or programming? How can I begin to distinguish that and to understand that? And again, it's about coming back to our bodies, and when is my fear also beginning to create maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy of some kind, where I'm afraid that things are not going to turn out right, and so therefore they don't turn out right. A couple of times I've had situations where I love to hike, and a couple of times I've gone hiking with people who I did not know had a terrible fear of falling. I didn't know that until we were actually hiking and we got to a stream. Two separate occasions in my life where we got to a stream, little streams, things that, you just kind of hop across, or there's big rocks where you can get across, where everyone was going across them. And in both situations, these people froze at the water, and both of them said, I can't do it. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. And I'm like, I was young and rash, and I was like, you can't fall. We're just going right across this little stream here. They fell. They fell because they were so terrified that their entire bodies were frozen. So their intuition, was that intuition or was that fear? That's my question. So how do I, we have to trust sometimes that our fear is so overwhelming that it's not intuition, but we'd better not do the thing that we say we want to do, because in some way or another, we're going to fall. So how do I develop the freedom in myself to know how to do the thing that I say I want to, or that I ought to do, without this anxiety, without this gripping? So I wanted to kind of move into a little bit of an experiential piece to look at that a little bit. And it's got, for those of you who actually felt that you were experiencing more anxiety when you looked at your decision and monitored your breath, I'll be interested to hear how you feel after this. But all of you, if you can lie down I don't have to see you in your lying down because the movement is going to be absolutely minimal, but you might enjoy it lying down more. But if you don't want to lie down, if you can be comfortable, if you can get on your couch or get somewhere where you can be absolutely comfortable. And as you're getting there, I'm just reading some of the things in the chat, and I love, as Jody said, but sometimes a bit of discomfort is okay. Absolutely. Sometimes we want to learn to be comfortable with our discomfort because we know ourselves. We know our habits. We know our stopping places. But the process of knowing that, oh, yeah, this is me, I get scared here, is another process, right? So once you're in your comfortable place, close your eyes. And I'm going to sort of kind of do it along with you just because it's helpful, but you don't have to be watching me at all. And with your eyes closed, turn your attention to your face. Just sensing your face right now. Again, coming back to this idea of the air on your face, letting the sensation from sensing your face to move up into your scalp. Sense the weight of your head, regardless of whether you're lying down with your head on the floor or your head is erect. And I want you to just begin the tiniest movement of your head, so small that it's invisible to anybody who's looking at you. It's almost as if your head is remaining still, but you're just letting the inside of your brain kind of float back and forth in your skull. Very tiny, tiny, tiny movement. Very slow. If you're sitting up, the sensation is of the head kind of floating on top of the spine. As you continue this tiny, tiny movement of your head, come back to sensing your breath. And some of you are moving your head a little bit more than you need to. It's very tiny. And then let that go. Just pause a moment. And bring your attention to your right arm, wherever your right arm is right now in space. One of the conductors of information in ourselves, the skin receives impressions from the outside, but your fascia, the envelope that contains you, is transmitting information to your brain, to your nervous system. So as you're sensing your right arm, could you, just like you were doing with your head, just begin very gently rotating your arm. It's so, again, so small, no one can see it, but you can picture as that bone is turning ever so slightly, the movement of the fascia of your arm softening, flowing. It's like a micro movement just of the arm. And as you're attending to this idea that you are communicating with the fascial link in your arm, begin to let your attention travel across the front of your chest and down your left arm. Allow your right arm to be still and begin to move the left arm. Again, very, very small as possible. And then keep returning to your breath, as if the breath itself, each time you exhale, informs all the fascia all the way up through your arm. And you can feel your arm itself finding its true size, its true shape. And then from that left arm, could you just let that sensation move down to your left leg? So that, again, the left leg, even if you're sitting, just doing a tiny, tiny movement. You can either be moving your right leg. If you're sitting, you could be moving it a little left and right, or you could move your knee a little forward and back, just very tiny. And imagining those lines of clarity down your thigh, down your calf, into your foot. As if you were creating space in your leg. And then letting it travel over to your right foot, as if you were taking that fascial process up through your leg. Tiny, tiny movements, as if you were having a conversation, a very delicate and kind conversation with your parts, giving them space, giving them clarity. And then feeling all these lines, the arms, the legs, the head. Could you begin to let those lines inhabit your torso? As if you were outlining the inside of yourself. Staying connected to your breath. And then take a moment to come back to your breathing. And with each exhale, could you picture that as you're exhaling, that exhale is moving down your arms, down your legs, into your face. Down your back. Down your front. Noticing for yourself as you do this, do you encounter stopping points, obstacles, blockages? Don't try to force past them. Just notice. Then let it go. Open your eyes, come back to your seat if you were lying down, noticing how you feel as you do it. And take a look at that decision again. How do you feel about it now? Is it as anxiety provoking? Does it feel as important? Does it feel more accessible for you? So I'd love to open it up right now. I am going to address one of the things that already are in the chat, but if you have comments or questions about that experience, I would love to go deeper into it. But someone wrote, how do you know if you hate conflict? It's never the right time. that's an interesting question because I don't know if there's anybody that loves conflict. If you do, there's things that you might want to do to work on that. So many of us, including myself, always want it to be nice. We always want it to be smooth. We always want it to be great. And yet, as Jody pointed out, sometimes we have to learn to be a little bit uncomfortable. How do I find the balance between my wish to stay safe and not get engaged in conflict versus needing to move forward, right? And so for me, it's the word conflict. That's the problem. If I'm already looking at something as a conflict, I've got tension in my body. I've got anxiety in my body because in some way it's going to be me versus something, right? So how could I begin to feel centered in myself and not feel that I need this conflict in order to get what I want? I'm not going to have the answer today, but that's kind of, if I'm already saying it's conflict, I've already got tension. So how can I reduce the tension? Okay. So Anne has a question, comment. You can unmute yourself, I believe.
This leads right into what's going on with me, is my decision was about how to handle a contractor that made a mistake. And there has been this part of me that's like you said, it's like I'm going to make it a fight. And just in the course of what we've done so far, it's like I realize I can make the decision not to make it a fight. It's like there is this position or stance of being in conflict, like I'm going to get my way. And from what I know of this contractor, he wants to do the right thing. I know that. So I just feel like it will go a lot better if I go in there with this expectation that he wants to do the right thing, and we need to just have a meeting of the minds, and it's going to take some discussion and negotiation, but I just feel so much more relaxed about it.
And you're giving us a beautiful example, right? Your gut reaction when you looked at what the mistake was, oh my God, I got it. That's the gut reaction. But your intuition told you that that's not the answer, right? So it's a beautiful illustration of the difference between a gut feeling and an intuitive understanding of what is needed. The word understanding, again, is so important there. And so when you go into this conversation, if you are able to stay with your breath, right, to remember your limbs, you're going to be able to calm him as well, right? When I am feeling tense and confrontational, the natural reaction, we're animals. The hair on the back of his neck is going to come up and he's going to want to protect himself. So this is, thank you, is a beautiful illustration of exactly what we're looking at. So there's a whole lot of things coming up here. I'm imagining attending to skin, mini movement, fascia, as I have a discussion I wrote about. Beautiful. Exactly. And this is actually, sometimes I call this our birthright that we've forgotten about, right? We have spent so many centuries with I think, therefore I am, and not realizing that I am. And in fact, Damasio, who I mentioned earlier, his first book was called Descartes' Error, because he said, it's not I think, therefore I am, but I am, therefore I think. Okay, Allison.
So my decision was around a elective medical procedure that I've already decided to have next week, but I have anxiety about it. And when you did the initial breathing exercise, I was actually surprised how difficult the inhale was. Like I was having to work to take the inhale. And then when we were asked to look down at the question, I did feel look down at the decision we'd written down. I felt some ease. And then when you led us through the exercise where we were lying down, um, I felt so much relaxation and security, and even in like the part of the body where I'm potentially having this procedure done, it sort of relaxed and dissipated. And my cynicism or my question, like it felt like there was more ease around the decision to, yes, go ahead and have this done. But how much is just my nervous system relaxing in the exercise that we led through? And can I really trust my what I feel is my intuition here?
And I trust my intuition. So my suggestion to you is that you repeat this exercise and see if you can verify for yourself that it's not just, oh, I'm getting more relaxed and so I feel okay about it, versus I think this is the right decision. You've already made the decision. Something in you already understands that you need to do this. So your next step really is to relax and know that it's going to be okay, right? So I think that whenever we have something big happening, like a surgery, it's going to come up, it's going to go down. That feeling's going to come up, it's going to go down, right? And when I can use my somatic tools to come back to my inner knowing that it's going to be okay, that is where this work can be so incredibly helpful. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. And I think somewhere in me, I know I could change my mind. I know I could change my decision, but, I think continuing to listen to my intuition is the way to go.
Absolutely. And, if your intuition suddenly on the day of the surgery says, I can't do it, there's always rescheduling,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, listen to those parts of yourself. It's important. It's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else anyone wants to share about that? I have a hard time really deciding what I want, whether I even have permission to take myself into consideration. So there's a lot of anxiety. So that's a big work, right? Because first of all, how many things do you have to choose between? What does it mean to need permission? Permission from whom? Where do I get permission? How do I give myself permission? And then on top of it, I'm adding anxiety. So not necessarily something that we can solve today, but my question for you is to just ask yourself, what do you need to get permission? What kind of permission do you need? As one of my friends always goes, you're the boss of you, right? So you can give yourself the permission. What do you need to give yourself the permission? You can journal on that one for a little while. Interesting that Feldenkrais called intuition the idiot within. Yes, but he was referring, I think, to people who just go, oh yeah, I just trust my intuition. and that it's something from beyond. And that is the thing. It's like knowing what is about to happen, or knowing what I need to do, is way different than just going, oh, I intuited that. There's a big difference between them. But thank you for that, Tyr, because, Feldenkrais definitely did. I think he had intuition about a lot of things, for sure. Is it ingrained intuition or learned intuition? And I agree. But again, I think ingrained intuition is closer to instinct, because I think that to be really intuitive, to go all the way back to, I don't know how many of you read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and how the people, like, for example, there was an art historian who just took one look at a statue and went, it's fake. And then they asked him, well, how did you know that? How could you tell? And he's like, I don't know. But it was his years of studying that particular kind of statue that gave him the intuitive understanding of knowing that that statue was fake. That is the difference between intuition and instinct. Okay, one more question. Oh, Cheryl.
Hi.
Hi.
My thing that I was anxious about as I looked at it was I gave myself a part to play in a two-part. I'm going to be the interviewer. I'm going to be interviewing Martha Washington at a tea. I don't have any experience in public speaking or acting or anything, and the anxiety is really, I knew at the time I needed to do that, but now that it's getting closer to the time to do it, it's like, what was I thinking? It's almost like you have a baby, you're carrying this baby, and then you get the baby, and it's like, oh God, what did I do?
Well, I mean, I love that you just spontaneously decided to do something that you've never done before, and that you put yourself in a position where you can't back out. I mean, you can back out if you want to,
Yeah.
but two things occur to me. One of them was one time I was just, I don't even remember what I did anymore, but it was an utter and complete, absolute failure. And I just felt like crawling in a hole and dying. And a friend of mine went, Lavinia, no one has ever really died of embarrassment. Get over yourself. And, when I heard that, I thought, it's so true. I mean, we make things so big and so important. And, in the long run, you're going to do this. Is it a one shot deal?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope so.
So I know that when I used to be in the theater and I would premiere a new piece, and I would be standing backstage, and I would say to myself, in 2 hours, this will be over, and I'll still be alive. So I think you're going to have a great time. I have it.
I'll remember that line.
Yeah, that's it. It'll be over, and I'll be having a glass of wine in a nice restaurant, listening to everybody talk about how much fun they had. Welcome.